After 3 years without intimacy, I claimed my ex's inheritance. Before we begin the story, make sure to subscribe to our channel and never miss more incredible stories every day. My ex stood up screaming when the lawyer read my name. That is how the will reading began for me. Shock, then silence, so complete the wall clock clicked. I'm Ivy, 30, a CNA who spends nights lifting strangers out of fear and back into breath. For 3 years I also lived with Marcus, the man who promised partnership and delivered distance. Separate bedrooms. Excuses about focus, growth, pressure. No intimacy, no warmth, but endless rules about how I dressed, who I could see, when I could speak around his friends. He controlled the keys, the calendar, the guest list, the smile. I controlled nothing except the tenderness I kept trying to offer like a lamp no one would switch on. His mother, Evelyn Hart, was kind to me in ways he wasn't. When her cancer worsened last autumn, I changed shifts to sit by her bed. I learned where she kept the peppermint tea, how to soften pillows so bones didn't ache. Marcus managed logistics from his phone. Evelyn died in February. Marcus told everyone he'd handle the estate because that's what a dutiful son does. He expected her house, her accounts, her art. He told me to keep quiet at the reading, not to embarrass him with tears. I brought tissues anyway. Lawyer Carter cleared his throat. The will was ordinary. Then he unfolded a stapled page. A codicil dated January 12th, notarized by a hospice clerk named B. Alvarez. It redirected the payable on death account ending -$4,412 and a modest caregiver trust to me. Marcus's chair screeched back. "This is outrageous," he shouted. "She's a tenant, not family." I felt heat rise to my face, but my voice stayed level. "I was her caregiver," I said. "Ask the nurses." Aunt May placed a hand on my wrist. "Read the rest," she told Carter. He did. Emails from Evelyn to the executor, noting that I kept detailed logs, vitals, meds, falls, dates, when no one else did. Love isn't a word the law uses, but care leaves a paper trail. The room filled with whispers and the dry rasp of Marcus grinding his teeth. Then Carter said there would be a brief recess for document copies, and Marcus followed me into the hall like a storm with polished shoes. "Enjoy this," he hissed, "because I will burn it all down." He leaned close, smiling for the security camera, and gave me a deadline I won't forget. "Tomorrow," he said, "I would sign everything back or learn what ruin feels like." Marcus used to pull me into photographs with an arm around my waist, the kind of couple pose that says, "Look, we're perfect." In the early months, he cooked on Sundays, candles lit, playlists tuned to an algorithm he swore made romance scientific. Then, slow as winter, the touches thinned. He said intimacy was a distraction from growth, that celibacy would sharpen our focus and secure our future. I told myself it was a season. Seasons end. Ours didn't. We moved into his condo with separate bedrooms that he called sleep sanctuaries. He locked his phone with Face ID and turned it face down at dinner. My key fob sometimes failed after his software updates, forcing me to buzz the desk. When I asked about sex, about closeness, he would say, "Love is discipline, Ivy. You're too emotional." I learned to make tea at 2 a.m. instead of crying. I learned to tuck my feelings into pause, then bury them under task lists. My job was a mercy. People in pain needed touch, and I could give it safely, without being told I was needy for wanting it back. The humiliation came at a party before Christmas. Marcus toasted to partnerships built on restraint, half his friends nodding like he'd quoted scripture. Someone asked if we'd set a wedding date. Marcus laughed and said, "We're not in that phase. Ivy's still growing." The room chuckled. I smiled at the carpet. That night, I slept on the couch. He texted from his room, "Don't take it personally. This is leadership." Evelyn saw more than anyone. She'd call me my sunflower and press biscotti into my hands. In her living room, she asked softly, "Are you happy, dear?" I swallowed the rehearsed answer and said, "I'm working on it." She patted my cheek, eyes shining with a sadness that understood too much. When her chemo took her hair, I held the basin and whispered the jokes Marcus never had time to hear. When she couldn't keep food down, I tracked calories and called the clinic at midnight. Marcus posted heartfelt updates with photos from her good days. I thought silence kept the peace. It only kept me small. The morning after the will reading, I found a message from Marcus waiting on the counter. It wasn't handwriting. It was typed and printed, as sterile as a memo. Return the pod account and trust at tomorrow's noon meeting, it read. Or I'll share what I should have years ago. Choose wisely. No signature, just a screenshot of my apartment door like a dare. I stared at the hall camera red dot and remembered every travel for work week that never matched his company calendar. I remembered a second toothbrush appearing in his guest bath and disappearing before I could ask. I remembered separate bedrooms explained away as sleep optimization while he silenced my questions with a leadership TED Talk tone. The bank letters started in January, thin envelopes marked important account information. Marcus stacked them by the door and said, "All handled." Evelyn, hands trembling, pressed one into mine when he left the room. "Ivy, would you check this?" The balance screenshots didn't match. Transfers to a brokerage I'd never heard of, then to a private trust with no beneficiary listed. Her eyes slid to the floor. "He says it's tax strategy. I don't speak that language." At hospice, Nurse Lila asked me to write the care notes because you're the one here. I initialed each entry. Pain scores, morphine times, oxygen sats, falls prevented. Lila saw me bring soup, change bedding, rotate pillowcases when fevers soaked through. She also saw Marcus take calls in the hallway and leave early for meetings. Doubt is a soft knock before it becomes a battering ram. I kept answering softly. He's tired, he's stressed, he's trying. The knocks grew louder. 2 days after the funeral, I found a travel itinerary in the printer tray for a conference Marcus never attended. Wrong city, wrong dates. The login history on his smart lock showed entries at 2 a.m. when he was on red-eye flights. His phone pinged from the condo while his Instagram posted airport lounges. I told myself none of this mattered anymore now that Evelyn was gone. But the codicil did something strange to my spine. It straightened it. Aunt May texted, "Keep every document. Dates matter when truth finally stands up." That evening, Marcus's family chat lit up with a new word for me: gold digger. Marcus chose a restaurant with glass walls and an audience. He ordered champagne to celebrate closure and raised a toast loud enough for the neighboring table to hear. "To Ivy," he said, "for helping Mom with errands." The pause landed like a slap. Laughter sparkled around us like broken glass. I put my glass down. "They weren't errands," I said quietly. "They were nights." He smiled without warmth. "Don't be dramatic. People grieve in different ways. Now, let's be adults about this codicil mistake. You'll return everything at noon tomorrow. I'll include a generous thank you to keep you comfortable." "Comfortable?" I asked. "Like a pet." The waiter recoiled at the tone in my voice. Marcus unclenched his jaw. "I'm offering you dignity here, Ivy. Don't force me to escalate." I paid my portion and walked out to air that felt sharper than winter. On the way home, I stopped by Evelyn's house to gather the last box of medical supplies I'd donated. In the den, under a floral notebook, I found the bound caregiver logs the hospice gave us. Lila had added a sticky note. "For executor, primary caregiver, Ivy. Confirm with staff sign-offs." Every page carried my initials. October 3rd, repositioned, prevented skin tear. October 28th, caught fall, MD notified, vitals stabilized. December 15th, managed fever, started cool compress rotation. 01/09, weighed 116 pounds, documented meal intake. My handwriting marched across the months like a quiet army. On the inside cover, Evelyn had written in shaky script, "Thank you for showing up when love was honest work." I sat on the rug and cried for the first time since the funeral. Not because of money, but because someone had seen me when it counted. When the tears stopped, I photocopied every page at the drugstore down the block and slid the originals into a plastic sleeve. By the time I reached my apartment, the hallway smelled like someone's burnt toast. Inside, another envelope waited. No return address. A single line, cut from a magazine and glued down like a ransom note. "Noon. Don't test me." At noon tomorrow, he promised consequences I might not walk away from. The family chat became a bonfire. Cousin Tessa wrote, "You're disgusting," then posted a collage of Marcus hugging hospital flowers. An uncle I'd met twice called me a parasite. Someone messaged my workplace's main line with a concern about caregiver ethics. The supervisor who knows my work rolled his eyes and said, "Document everything, Ivy. We've got you." Aunt May arrived with a canvas tote and a face like weathered oak. She put 3 items on my table: a spiral notebook, a cheap voice recorder, and a folder of plastic sleeves. Dates, screenshots, names, she said. People rewrite history when it scares them. Paper refuses to. I took a breath that hurt. I don't want to become a person who saves receipts for love. You already are a person who saved a woman's nights, she said. Now you save yourself. Boundary 1. You don't meet him alone. Boundary 2. You speak in writing. Boundary 3. You don't apologize for what you lawfully own. We spent the afternoon building a chronology. September 28th, first hospice intake, my initials on medication sheet. October 12th, Evelyn asked for a notary's number. November 5th, Marcus posted from a gala. Nurse note shows I was present for a 5-hour fever. December 1st, email from Evelyn to executor Carter with subject, codicil draft. January 12th, codicil executed, notarized B. Alvarez. February 18th, date of death, 03/07. While reading. At dusk, I made tea and watched the sky bruise purple. My phone buzzed with messages I didn't open. I kept thinking of the phrase, no intimacy for growth. Growth for whom? He had touch, just not with me. Aunt May squeezed my shoulder. If you want to let it go, we can. Walk away, keep the apartment, start again. I stared at the logs and the codicil copies. Evelyn had chosen with a clear mind, witnessed and documented. She hadn't wanted me rich. She wanted me safe. I won't give back what she trusted me with, I said, voice steadying. But I also won't fight dirty. May nodded. Then we prepare for noon, and we bring witnesses. At midnight, footsteps paused outside my door and then moved on. Morning brought small mercies, clear light, strong coffee, and a reply from Carter. I had emailed him just after dawn with scanned copies of the codicil, Eve's emails, and the pod beneficiary form. He responded like a surgeon, precise, calm. Ms. Ivy, codicil dated January 12th appears properly executed. Notary B. Alvarez is registered. Pod ending -4412 lists you as beneficiary as of December 22nd. Please bring originals at noon. Security will be present. I exhaled for the first time in 24 hours. I printed his email and slid it into a sleeve with the others. Then I opened Evelyn's final text to me, a message I had not read since the night before she died. You showed up when it hurt. I hope you show up for yourself too. There was one more envelope I hadn't opened, a thin, tin one from the hospice safe. Inside was a notarized note in Evelyn's wavering hand. I changed designations in sound mind due to consistent caregiving by Ivy. I do not wish funds used to maintain appearances. E.H. The notary stamp was crisp, dated January 12th, the same day as the codicil. Evidence is lonely until someone reads it out loud. I packed the folder, the recorder, my ID, and a granola bar because grief has no respect for blood sugar. At 11:20, Aunt May and I stood in the elevator at Carter's building. My hands shook around the folder. Whatever happens, she said, you can leave the room whenever you need to. In the conference room, 2 security officers stood discreetly near the door. A woman from the bank, Ms. Reyes, sat with a laptop. Carter arranged copies like he was knitting order from chaos. Marcus swept in at 11:59 with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. He brought 2 relatives and a man I didn't recognize who looked like a crisis manager in designer shoes. Carter gestured to chairs. We will review the codicil, the pod, and caregiver documentation. We ask all parties to maintain civility. Marcus leaned in my direction, whispering, still time to avoid embarrassment, Ivy. Be smart. I pressed record on the little device and folded my hands in my lap. Carter began methodically. Ms. Reyes, please confirm the pod ending -4412. She tapped keys and nodded. Beneficiary updated to Ivy Nolan on December 22nd at 10:14 a.m. Executed in branch. Teller initials, KM. She swiveled the screen so we all could see the signature pad capture. Evelyn's shaky scrawl. My initials as witness. Marcus's cousin scoffed. Evelyn hated banks. She would never go in. Ms. Reyes replied evenly. She arrived with Ms. Nolan and Nurse Lila. Video verifies entry and exit. We retain footage for 90 days. Stills are in the record. Carter slid the caregiver logs across the table. Hospice documentation shows Ms. Nolan present during key events, including 3 falls prevented. Entries initialed IN. Nurse signatures align. He pointed to the dates: October 3rd, October 28th, December 15th, January 9th. Mr. Hart, where were you those evenings? Marcus inhaled, then said smoothly, at the hospital's family suite. Carter clicked a remote. A screen lit with time-stamped photos from Marcus's social media, galas, rooftop bars, a ski weekend tagged December 15th. You posted these in real time, Carter said mildly. Different city, different time zone. The room shifted, like someone had taken a notch out of gravity. Marcus's jaw worked. Scheduled posts. Aunt May murmured, scheduled neglect. Carter continued. Executor emails from Evelyn to my office, December 1st and January 7th. Describe Ivy's daily care and a desire not to reward performative visits. The notary's log confirms a house call on January 12th at 3:40 p.m. for the codicil. Witness B. Alvarez is prepared to appear. My heart thudded at the steadiness of it, the way facts built like scaffolding until a picture stood up by itself. Marcus's crisis man finally spoke. Even if valid, this is against the spirit of family. Probate observes documents, not vibes, Carter said. And we're not finished. He opened a final envelope and laid down 2 glossy stills from the bank camera. Evelyn's thin hand on mine as she signed. My face bent close to read her line by line. Marcus knocked his chair as he stood. You tricked her, he said, voice shaking. You used her illness to steal what I deserve. I braced my hands on the table as Carter lifted his palm to stop him. Carter's tone never rose. The documents don't steal, he said. They clarify. Ms. Reyes, please read the pod account balance as of date of death. She scanned, then said, $184,642, payable on death to Ms. Nolan. A murmur rippled. Carter lifted the stapled codicil. Second change. Creation of this Sunflower Care Trust, funded with $75,000 from the art liquidation and rental proceeds for 1 year. Beneficiary Ms. Nolan. Purpose clause, for rest, education, and relocation if needed due to harassment. Surplus beyond beneficiaries to be donated to the Hospice Foundation. I stared at the words like they were a window someone had finally opened. Sunflower. Evelyn's name for me. Marcus laughed in disbelief. She couldn't have written that. She barely wrote at the end. Carter set down a short letter in Evelyn's hand dated January 12th. I dictate clearly, later hand sign. I want Ivy safe. Marcus will always choose the room with mirrors. The notary seal bled through the page like a bruise. The crisis man leaned forward. Even if authentic, any undue influence, and we can test. By all means, Carter said. But undue influence requires evidence of coercion at the time of execution. You will find the nurse, the notary, and the bank quite inconvenient to that theory. Marcus's cousin jabbed a finger at me. You think this makes you family? Your staff. The word landed, ugly and familiar. I looked at my hands, the same hands that had warmed washcloths and steadied elbows, and felt a steadiness rise. Staff had been there when family wasn't. Carter closed the folder. We will adjourn until tomorrow to finalize filings. Ms. Nolan is within her rights to retain the pod and trust distributions. Any harassment will be documented and forwarded to the court. Marcus stared past me, jaw clenched so tight I wondered if something might crack. On the elevator down, Aunt May squeezed my elbow. Not why yet, she murmured. But at last, what? He stepped close and said, very softly, there were other documents missing. Other documents? I asked, keeping my voice even. Marcus's smile didn't move his eyes. Emails. Drafts. Letters she wrote when she was angry. I'm sure you don't want those floating around. Return what isn't yours, and I'll keep private things private. He had always counted on my embarrassment. Shame was the leash he liked best. I pictured Evelyn's careful notes, the nurse footage, the teller's initials. Shame couldn't argue with timestamps. That night, Aunt May and I built a plan. I would gather every confirmation I could, the teller's statement, the notary's log, Lila's memo. We would also pull the building videos showing Marcus at the condo during his red-eye flights. If he smeared, we'd answer with paper, not rage. I wrestled with the quiet path. Accept the inheritance, keep my head down, ignore the noise. The money would let me sleep, Maybe move away from the condo with its cold hallways. But sleep wasn't peace if I left a lie breathing. At midnight, I drafted a short statement for Carter to file. I accept Evelyn Hart's gifts as documented and witnessed. I reject harassment and misrepresentation. I request all questions be directed to counsel. No clapbacks, no gloating. Just the spine the codicil had given me. We met Ms. Reyes at the bank in the morning. Here's the teller log, she said, sliding a copy over. KM remembers Evelyn bringing biscotti for the staff. Lila emailed a signed attestation that I was present for medication rounds and fall prevention. The notary replied with her license number and a willingness to appear. Every piece tightened the net until there was only one hole left. Marcus's narrative that I had withheld intimacy to manipulate him. The truth was simpler and uglier. He had withheld intimacy to control me. The building manager printed the smart lock history. Entries at 2:03 a.m., 2:11 a.m., and 2:27 a.m. On nights Marcus claimed to be across the country. My own badge log showed double shifts those same dates, verifiable alibis that didn't require me to say one cruel word about him. Ready? Aunt May asked as we stood outside Carter's office for the afternoon filing. I nodded, feeling the old ache and a new kind of courage balance in my chest. The close call arrived wearing roses. A delivery arrived at my apartment, 12 long stems and a card. Let's start over. Dinner at 8? We can fix this. 10 minutes later, my phone lit with voice notes. Marcus sounded tender, almost hoarse. I'm sorry, Ivy. I'm lost without Mom. I know I failed you. Just don't let lawyers decide our story. Love bombing after a threat feels like silk over a knife. I set the flowers in the hallway and texted back. Please direct all communication to counsel. At 7:30 p.m., Ms. Reyes called from the bank. Ms. Nolan, an attempt was made to alter the pod beneficiary. It was denied. Changes aren't permitted after date of death. We've recorded the access and notified counsel. I thanked her, hung up, and sat very still. He would not change the past, so he would try to rewrite me. At 8 sharp, my intercom rang. Marcus's voice, smooth to velvet. Just talk to me. No lawyers. Aunt May stood behind me with crossed arms. Boundary 3, she whispered. I didn't buzz him in. Instead, I opened the recorder app and placed the device against the speaker. Marcus, you said at lunch I should return the pod and trust or face consequences. Are you now withdrawing that threat? Silence. A cough. You're being dramatic. Are you withdrawing it? He exhaled. Fine. I'll let the court handle consequences. The elevator doors opened down the hall. Footsteps approached. A heavy knock shook the wood. We'll talk now, he said, or I'll tell your building exactly what kind of person you are. I thought of every time he had isolated me with manners that sounded like care. I thought of Evelyn's note. I do not wish funds used to maintain appearances. I picked up my folder and slid it into my tote. Aunt May grabbed her keys. Where are you going? Marcus demanded through the door. To the place where documents, not threats, decide, I said, voice steady. Behind him, the roses drooped in their plastic sleeve like a staged apology. We stepped into the hall and faced him for the first time without flinching. Carter agreed to a second, fully recorded session. Given the attempted change, he said, we'll proceed with a formal deposition-style review. Ms. Reyes will attend. The notary will appear by video. Family members may observe. Word spread faster than truth. Marcus arrived with an aunt, a cousin, and a friend who live-streamed everything to nowhere, camera pointed at his shoes. I came with Aunt May and a spine that surprised me. Carter set ground rules. No interruptions. Questions through counsel. All materials shared will be timestamped. He placed 3 tidy stacks. 1. The codicil and pod. 2. Caregiver logs with nurse signatures. 3. Building and social timestamps. The recorder's red light glowed. MS. Reyes swore in, then read the bank log entries. The notary, neat bun and calm eyes, appeared on the screen. I verified identity, capacity, and intent, she said. Ms. Hart understood and expressed clear reasons. Consistent caregiving by Ms. Nolan. Concern about performative visits. Marcus clenched his jaw. You insult the dead to flatter a stranger. The notary blinked. I record facts. They don't require flattery. Carter turned to me. Ms. Nolan, did you ever request money from Ms. Hart? No, I said. I asked for a second blanket, and a better wheelchair cushion. There was a softness then, a brief shift in the room, like fresh air sneaking under the door. I felt Evelyn in that quiet, approving. Marcus's aunt barked. This is humiliation. Family comes first. Carter nodded. Then family should have come when she rang the call bell. We reviewed the smart lock history, the social posts, the travel lies. The crisis man's pen stopped scratching. Finally, Carter closed his notebook. This is our record. Further attempts to alter designations or intimidate Ms. Nolan will be added and filed. Outside, rain braided the windows, and the security guard shifted his stance, watching. Aunt May squeezed my elbow once, the quiet kind of blessing we needed. He whispered, "You won a battle. I will scorch every field." The big reveal wasn't a shout. It was a sentence read in a calm voice. Carter lifted Evelyn's note and read aloud. "I do not wish funds used to maintain appearances. I wish to reward care given without applause." He placed the page before the camera for the record. Marcus laughed too loudly. She was medicated. She didn't know what she meant. The notary's voice came through the speaker. Capacity was checked and documented. Miss Hart named people and items correctly. She cried when speaking of Ms. Nolan's night work. Night work. It wasn't heroic. It was washing bowls and turning bodies and noticing fevers before they spiked. It was saying, "I am here," and meaning it at 3 in the morning. Carter clicked to the emails. December 1st, subject codicil draft, language about not rewarding performance. January 7th, confirm nurse witness. January 12th, executed. He turned to Marcus. "Do you have any documents showing your mother intended otherwise?" Marcus's face flickered like a bad signal. "She told me." "Documents," Carter repeated. Silence swelled, then popped. Marcus slammed his hand on the table. "You think a CNA deserves what blood does?" I felt my jaw tighten. "I think the person who showed up deserves to be safe." His aunt hissed. "You seduced a dying woman's pity." Lila's attestation lay open between us like a shield. Primary caregiver, Ivy Nolan, it read. Present for vitals, meds, mobility, hygiene. Witnessed by L. Garcia, RN. Carter gathered the stacks. "We'll file this afternoon. Any threats to MS. Nolan from this point will be reported. You are free to pursue probate challenges. We are free to respond." I stood and shouldered my tote. Marcus stood too, knuckles white. He leaned so close I could see the tiny scar under his lip he used to call a dimple. "You can't keep it," he whispered. "Not in this city. People will make sure you learn humility." Outside the conference room, the hall filled with the rustle of umbrellas and hushed gossip as relatives pretended not to stare. I stepped back and felt the wall behind me like a spine holding me up. Fallout doesn't explode, it drifts. The days after the deposition were a snow of paperwork and rumors. A burner account messaged my coworkers, mixing lies with half-true details about my shifts. Someone tagged my landlord in a thread calling me a thief. I learned to mute, archive, and forward to Carter. He filed our record. Marcus filed a probate challenge, citing undue influence in the codicil and emotional coercion via weaponized deprivation. The phrase almost made me laugh. 3 years without intimacy had been his choice, his control. The bank flagged an attempted access from an unrecognized IP and locked the pod. Ms. Reyes sent me a formal letter and a small kindness. We added a note to expect harassment. We're on your side. The hospice reached out offering a statement about volunteer caregivers. Lila texted, "Come by. We're a family, too." I paid a price. Sleep came in bites. I jumped at footsteps in the hallway. My hands trembled lifting a patient once, and I sat in the break room breathing into my palms until the wave eased. Aunt May brewed chamomile and taught me to count things I could feel. Chair, carpet, mug, breath. I wondered if taking the money had made me someone I didn't want to become. Then I opened Evelyn's trust clause again, for rest, education, and relocation if needed due to harassment. She had known this would bruise. She had packed ice. Carter called with a development. "There's a police report," he said. A neighbor filed it. Someone tried to enter Evelyn's house at 1:12 a.m. last night using a copied key. My stomach lurched. Was anything taken? A desk drawer was forced. We're sending an auditor to confirm what, if anything, is missing. Sit tight, Ivy. Don't go alone anywhere. I stared at the recorder on my table and pressed play. My own voice filled the room. Calm at doors, calm in meetings, calm in storms. Somehow, hearing it made my hands go still. The radiator hissed like a warning that didn't know my name. Aunt May looked up from her knitting and met my eyes without blinking. Healing looked like small, unphotogenic things. I set my phone to do not disturb after 9. I scheduled therapy and kept going even when I felt fine. I opened a savings account titled Sunflower Rest and set automatic transfers so the trust didn't feel like shame. It felt like permission. With Carter's help, I drafted a letter to the family. I accept Evelyn Hart's documented gifts. I will donate 10% to the Hospice Foundation in her name and publish confirmation. I will maintain transparency with the executor. I ask for no contact unless through counsel. We sent it certified. Some envelopes came back with angry notes scrawled on them. I kept each unopened, filed. I visited the hospice garden and planted actual sunflowers beside a plaque that simply said Evelyn. I brought biscotti for Nurse Lila and left a copy of the trust clause with the administrator so they could explain to any caller that the gift had purpose. Aunt May and I cleaned my apartment like we were evicting ghosts. We boxed the photographs that hurt and left up the ones that didn't. I replaced the couch we'd bought together with a thrifted one that hugged me. I forgot, briefly, what his cologne smelled like. Marcus kept filing motions. The court kept scheduling dates. Carter kept answering in measured paragraphs that read like deep breaths. Ms. Reyes sent one more email saying the pod would clear to a new account by month's end. I set up paperless everything and disabled location sharing I'd once thought harmless. One afternoon, a woman stopped me outside the condo. She'd seen the live stream, knew the story, and whispered, "I left someone like him last year. Thank you for not being quiet." We cried the small, relieved cry of strangers who recognize each other's weather. I went home and brewed peppermint tea the way Evelyn taught me. Steam first, then breathe, then sip. A siren wailed far off, thin as fishing line pulled through dusk. When the phone rang again from an unknown number, I almost let it die to voicemail. I answered because silence had once been my prison. It was Ms. Reyes, cheerful in that bank way that makes numbers feel like neat boxes. "Transfer complete," she said. "Executor confirms filings are in order. If you need a referral for a financial planner who won't treat you like a headline, I have too." I wrote the names down and thanked her 3 times. After we hung up, I sat at the table with the folder that had once felt heavier than I could carry. I took out Evelyn's note and read the line I had avoided. I want Ivy safe. Not rich. Not famous. Safe. People mistake safety for smallness. It's a room with windows that open. I thought about 3 years of withheld touch and the lies it taught me. That asking is neediness. That hunger is weakness. That wanting warmth is childish. Intimate neglect is still neglect. You learn to accept less until less becomes a religion. Paper doesn't heal that. But paper can keep you from being erased. My advice is not romantic. Photograph documents. Name dates. Save emails. When someone says love is discipline, see whose comfort the discipline protects. If you're caregiving, keep a simple log. Pain scores, meds, meals, small mercies. One day, those ordinary lines might be the only witnesses willing to speak. I keep working my shifts. I keep the sunflowers watered. I enrolled in a night class Evelyn once circled in a community brochure. After court finishes, I'll move to a place where the hallway doesn't smell like his cologne and the lock knows only my face. On Sundays, I bake biscotti the way she showed me, though mine always crack. I mail a tin to the hospice and drop a bag at the bank with a handwritten note for KM. It isn't performative. It's a loop closed with gratitude. The smear threads faded. New rumors took their place elsewhere. I realized quiet victories don't trend. They stack like folded linens in a clean closet. Useful, ready, enough. The city hums softer when you finally trust your own spine. I leave a biscotti on her plaque and walk home lighter.